Welcome everyone to our first episode of In Focus. So what will we be focusing on today? Surprise, surprise. The medical autocracy has arrived. Beware. For those old enough to remember the world in the years after 9/11, it is easy to recall the panic and obsession in Western countries, especially with respect to jihadi extremism and the fear of terrorist attacks. Day after day, week after week, front pages were filled with stories about psychopathic murderers lurking in our midst, ready to strike at any moment. If you are a young man, a Muslim one, especially with a beard, living, let's say, in Europe, life was very tough at the time. Outrageous discrimination was rife, personal freedoms were dramatically curtailed, and destructive wars were started. Now, of course, in hindsight, this seems very much an outrageous overreaction. But many still, now in 2020, perceive Muslims somehow as a potential threat. Fundamental rights, essentially in a democracy, still have not recovered. Much of the panic-based legislation from those days is still in place today. Hundreds of thousands of innocent civilians were killed because the West decided to lash out in fear. The violence caused by them is still going on, causing new victims non-stop. Side note, remember to subscribe and share the video with your friends if you're liking this content so that we can grow our community. But hey, back to terrorism. Terrorism does exist, of course. There have been dozens of attacks since those early days. It is also, however, completely obvious that our society's reaction was destructive and caused much more harm than good. So, what led to such a monumentally flawed response, we may ask? Well, we've devised 3 reasons that stand out and that can be blamed for this situation. First and foremost, partially and flawed information. This is a precious thing, and in the short term, there is simply insufficient data and understanding to base good policies on. In such circumstances, our uneasy relationship with uncertainty biases us towards horror scenarios, even if there is no significant reason to do so. Second of all, a Western population gripped in fear. Europeans and North Americans turned out to accept causing hundreds of civilian victims elsewhere as long as it made them feel marginally safer. Now we know, of course, that the violent Western response, as a matter of fact, made its own populations significantly less safe. But hey, in those days, it was all about the feelings, really, not about the rational analysis, as one might expect. Third and final, the complete dominance of security experts in overall policy making. Because terrorism in those years was seen as an existential threat to humanity, well, mostly to Western humanity. Consultants and analysts specializing in terrorism were the true makers of both domestic and foreign policy for a long period of time. Politicians followed their advice to the letter and were reluctant to overrule any suggestion coming from this sector. Therefore, political leadership was only nominally in charge, while true power resided with the specialist who promised to keep us safe from nightmares. To paraphrase Adam Curtis, the doctors. This final point may not be as obvious for those who believe that the population's security is a number one priority for all government. Moreover, any sensible person should advocate for politicians referring to experts whenever possible to solve the problems that they are facing. But precisely here is the issue. Politicians did not refer to experts per se. They referred to a small subset of experts, a subset specialized in one part of society's many challenges, namely anti-terrorism measures. All kinds of other security-related issues, including building a healthy and resilient society, long-term foreign policy implications, and internal stability and economic prosperity, were mostly ignored. Those experts were not listened to. The role of politicians is to look at all the segments of society, counselled by experts representing the full array of challenges that countries face. And yet, for some reason, for a short period of time, the West was effectively ruled by an anti-terror obsessed autocracy, with only those fighting terror in charge. The world is still dealing with the decisions made from that destructive informal governance system. Can you see the pattern here? Let's recall the problems in 2001. Partial and flawed information, a Western population gripped in fear, and the complete dominance of a small subset of experts. It seems similar, right? Similar to what we're living right now. See, now that you see it, you really won't help but notice. The current panic from the coronavirus just presents exactly the same problematic factors that we've just described. First and foremost, available information and analysis is at best partial and at worst deeply flawed. There is no scientific consensus worldwide yet about its exact nature, the best methods to contain it, or the long-term implications. As a result, worst-case scenarios are given excessive weight in policy making. Second of all, a world population gripped in fear. Headline after headline, bad news after bad news, tweet after tweet, politician after politician are feeding the intense anxiety and fear that already exists in global society. A virus has many commonalities with stereotypically portrayed terrorists. You don't see it till it strikes. People are terrified. It's an invisible, unpredictable enemy. They demand dramatic action. However, that is not an environment conducive to good policy making. Third and last, just like anti-terror experts ruled society in 2001 and 2002, now medical experts and practitioners are the only game in town when it comes to governmental policy making. No other experts are heard, and once again, politicians have completely surrendered their responsibility to look at the bigger picture. They are held hostage by the medical world. What are we seeing here? We are currently going through a medical autocracy. Just like with the war on terror, that may seem like an obviously good thing. Corona is evidently killing thousands of people, with hundreds of thousands infected. Intensive care units are overwhelmed, resulting in horrendously difficult scenarios for doctors and nurses to deal with. So why not give the medical control of domestic and foreign policy making to doctors? After all, they know what's best, right? Well, here's the thing. They do know what's best, but within their limited field of expertise. Again, within their limited field of expertise. They know what's best on how to contain the spread of diseases like COVID-19. They know how to best treat it and tackle its challenges. However, are we really assuming that they know how to make the best policies for our countries? Do they not know what's best for the mental welfare of the population? For that, we have psychologists, not doctors. Right, yeah? Because they do not know what's best for socially vulnerable groups. Because for that, we have sociologists and social workers. Of course, they do not know how to ensure economically marginalized groups do not fall off a cliff. Because for that, we have economists. Also, they do not even know how to interpret the bigger picture of the virus. Because for that, we precisely have statisticians and other academics. And this list could go on and on and on. Well, in a world filled with fear, the above points may seem somehow irrelevant. They most certainly are not. Ignoring them means causing many more deaths than COVID-19 will ever be responsible for. It means doing long-term harm to social resilience and national well-being. It means causing stress-related death and illnesses, including people who are already on the edge. It means making life near impossible, and sometimes literally impossible, for those at the bottom of the ranks of the economic ladder. This makes sense, right? The politically powerful middle classes now live in temporary fear because of coronavirus. But have we thought about the poorer classes, as now they are living in permanent fear of not able to survive because of economic means? We, not coronavirus, have just become their worst nightmare. It is clear that during a series of global health challenge like the one we are currently facing, medical experts will always be elevated to a special status. And they should, because that's why they're health experts. But that does not mean that nothing else matters. Let us not be fooled. With lockdowns and other such extreme measures, politicians have abdicated their responsibilities to wider society by only listening to this very specific subset of experts. They are essentially saying that nothing else matters anymore and that coronavirus victims are the only game in town, even if this means many more deaths and victims as a consequence. No other expertise is decided right now. Everyone else just needs to be quiet and stay at home. Doctor's orders. Let us know in the comment what your opinion is and how you see the situation. See you next week in the proximate video, because remember, once you see it, you won't help but notice.